The wind blew as a small train of scrap headed to the smelters, pulled by a single little green engine at the front. A recent cleanup at the quarry on the branch line had turned up lots of old machinery and rusty scrap. Originally, it had been intended that Percy would bring the trucks to the junction and leave them there to be picked up by Boko and his late-night goods to be dropped off at the smelters along the way. However, the midnight goods had been cancelled, so Percy had been tasked to bring the scrap up all the way to the smelter's yard himself. The little green engine was enjoying himself as he rolled along in the growing twilight, the island becoming shrouded in the coming of the night. Having lived on the railway for many years, he rarely had the time to leave the familiar sights of the branch line. Though in the pit of his firebox, he was deeply nervous about his destination. It wasn't the job itself that unnerved him. Being an industrial shunter himself, he knew how scrap was vital to industry. Rather, it was the dread of who was waiting there for him when he did arrive.
I hope those two are busy or asleep in their sheds when I get there.
Percy could remember hearing from Mavis and Toby how Stepney had accidentally wandered into the smelters years ago and had almost been scrapped by the two diesel shunters that worked there. He had only barely managed to be saved by Sir Topham Hatt, and since then, all steam engines had a deep fear of the place. Only diesels like Bear, Boko, and the Works diesel ever ventured there. Sometimes steam engines did pull trains of scrap to Killdane, but they never stuck around long before taking their leave, before the two shunters got any wise ideas. If they tried and failed to scrap Stepney, who could say they wouldn't try it again, and what if they succeeded? Night had fallen as Percy arrived at Killdane. He knew he was venturing somewhere he shouldn't, as he puffed down a small branch that departed from the main line, circling around the back of the city itself. The night sky, once filled with stars, became muddied, and eventually they all snuffed out as clouds of smoke obscured them. Brick walls rose up around Percy, cutting him off from the rest of the world, with only the roofs of houses on either side to indicate there was anything on the other side at all. Rounding the bend, he approached the entrance to the smelter's yard. But a distant signal shone yellow, with the home signal appearing red. It was just as well Percy came to a halt, as the gates ahead were closed. Percy looked up at the dark shapes beyond the gates. Huge structures stood tall against the night sky, their shapes ominous and bathed in shadows. In the distance, he saw the tall smelting shed. The glow of red-hot light danced against the windows as tall smokestacks billowed brown smoke that snuffed out the stars above.
Halt!
Before Percy could say anything, a bright white beam of light shone upon him.
State your name, designation, and business here.
Percy, Shunter, I got some scrap for you.
Silence fell before the voice spoke again.
Stay where you are. I'll get the gates.
The light then turned off, plunging the little green engine back into darkness. A door opened, and then a smaller light flicked on from inside the structure above. Because of the filthy windows, all Percy could see was a human-shaped shadow on the glass. There was a loud clack and a whirring noise. The gate in front of him slid open slowly. Once it had stopped, the signal light turned green.
There! Now get moving!
Percy, still confused by the matter, rolled in. It felt strange that such scrutiny was being made for, of all places, the smelters. It felt like a prison more than a place of industry. Percy ventured deep into the smelter's yard, his eyes darting around, looking for the Iron Twins. Suddenly, a couple horns honked in the distance, and rolling up out of the hazy night were the two grim-looking diesels. Their faces set in with a gruff-looking scowl, which slowly widened into a devious grin. They stopped on either side of the little green engine as he came to a stop.
Well, look at this, Bert. Little Steamer's decided to sacrifice himself to the torch.
Oh, aye, Arry. A wise choice on his part, making way for us diesels. How thoughtful.
Percy gulped. The other engines were right. These two were very unsettling.
You'll have scrap, but it won't be me.
Oh, is that so?
Ah, such a shame. You'd make a lovely scrap.
Where do you want these trucks?
Percy's blunt reply threw the Diesel's back. Their scowls returned, as it seemed they realized that they couldn't intimidate the little green shunter.
Just leave right there.
We'll handle it. Just get out of here if you're not going to commit yourself to scrap. But don't go around the back. Leave the way you came.
Percy didn't know what he meant, but he didn't really care, as he wanted to get back to the branch line. He was about to head off when his driver noticed something.
We need to find a water tower soon. You're almost out of water.
The shunter overheard them.
We don't have a water tower, but there is a standpipe located near the shed. Should work well enough for you.
We'll give that a look.
And so Percy puffed away, leaving the two Diesels behind. They growled threateningly as he passed.
Remember, leave the way you came in.
Percy did manage to find the standpipe, but the water came trickling in at a slow pace. It took a long time before his crew decided he had enough water to make it home.
It's good enough for me. The sooner I'm out of here, the better.
His crew agreed, and the little green engine puffed down the tracks. The tracks led him deeper into the smelter's yard, where the yard light stood tall and dark against the dark sky, barely illuminated by the lights of the smelting shed. Percy looked around carefully. Even with a headlamp, all he could see around him was scrap. The shells of old engines stood to one side, the rusted and rotted remains of old coaches to the other. While he knew it was nothing to be scared of, he found himself wishing he could just be out of this place sooner than later. Percy rounded a corner, and his light illuminated a pair of buffer stops, ending at the right near the smelting shed.
Oh, bother, just my luck, we're lost!
What do you know? Company. Not often do you get any visitors here. Especially not from steam engines.
Percy gasped and looked around. Soon his eyes fell on a large Diesel, sitting off the rails. The brown paint on his side was stained with oil and grime, obscuring the pale yellow wasp stripes on his side. Sheets of rust-covered metal were piled on top of its roof. Despite this, the engine didn't look ready for scrapping, just incredibly filthy. Its face was in a soft frown, though by the look in its eyes, it was the same look Henry had before he was rebuilt. Sickly.
Hello. I didn't know there was anyone here. This place is so dark I couldn't see where I was going.
That's perfectly okay, Steamer. This place is very dark. They don't repair all their lights, so it's only fair you'd get lost. Wait right here while your crew figures out where you are. I'll keep you in good company till they return.
Percy's crew did just that, leaving Percy behind as they walked back to find the main office. A loud mechanical click made Percy look around in shock. It sounded so out of place.
What was that?
I didn't hear anything.
An uncomfortable silence soon fell upon the two engines, before Percy decided to break it.
So, what's your name?
I have no real name. All I can remember of my past is I was once one of the strongest engines in my yard. 10 out of 10 for incredible strength. So you may call me 10.
Okay, 10. Hi, I'm Percy.
Percy, huh? A small name for a small engine.
What are you doing here? I thought diesels like you would be,
Out on the main line? I would be, but that's long past me now. As to why I'm here because I'm something the world doesn't want to remember, for some reason. Though I can't quite figure out why. Something they refuse to acknowledge. They created me for a purpose, and then suddenly they casted me aside, and all before I could fulfill my purpose. You know all about purpose, don't you, Steamer?
Percy wasn't really sure what 10 was getting at. He knew about purpose, sure, but it wasn't something he thought about regularly. 10 seemed to read Percy's thoughts as he responded again.
Purpose, my little friend, is what your role is in the world. We machines, we are clearly personified by our purpose. You, a small little tank engine meant to scamper around the yard. Me, a big, powerful diesel. 10 out of 10 for brutal strength, meant to pull heavy trains. And yet purpose can change, can it?
Yes, it can. I had some friends on the mainland who went from useful to scrap in no time at all.
10 gave a dismissive grunt and continued.
Well, being such a kind engine that you are, perhaps you can assist me with regarding my purpose.
Before Percy could ask what that meant, his crew returned.
The path behind us is clear. We can just go back the way we came.
Percy sighed in relief. He was glad to be leaving 10 behind. As sickly and sad as he looked, there was something about him Percy just couldn't put his buffer on.
Well, looks like I better be off. Sorry, I don't think I can help you.
Oh, but you can. You can help me right now. If you just get a little bit close.
If his driver hadn't had his hand on the regulator, he wouldn't have been able to move in time. Where Percy had been, a massive claw now rested, wrapped around the rails and sleepers, crushing them together as if they were nothing. It was rusty red, and stained with oil and hydraulic fluid that dripped from corroded hoses and snaked back towards the roof of 10. Percy looked up at 10's face. There was no trace of the sickly, grumpy scrap engine. All he could see now was a monster. His brow furrowed in a scowl so deep it looked as if his face had cracked apart. Teeth gnashed, and eyes shriveled around predator-like, looking for prey. Soon they settled on the frightened steam engine.
Get back here! Get back here, you little insect! You little green vermin! You're mine! 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 Get back here! Get back here! You're mine! Mine, 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 mine! Get back here! Get back here!
Percy screamed and backed away. The massive arm and claw swung wildly around, smashing the ground, smoke billowed out of a flurry of exhaust pipes. Shadows flashed against the walls like mad as the screaming and roaring faded into the distance. Percy was so terrified, he didn't stop until they suddenly bumped right into Arry.
Watch it!
Run! Run! There's a monster over there! He almost got me!
I warned you not to go over there. Now look what's happened. You've made him upset.
I'm sorry. I got lost. You knew that thing was back there!
Of course we did. That's why we told you not to go over there. Now we're gonna have to clear the mess over there after he's worn himself out.
And we just had those rails repaired too.
Percy stared at the two diesels with utter surprise. They'd not only known 10 was back there, but the way they spoke about him, they were used to dealing with him.
How long has that monster been back there?
The two diesels looked at each other for a moment, debating if they should say anything. Their expressions were grim and haunted. Then they spoke.
After we tried to scrap Stepney, Faz said he'd find a way to make us behave. And he did.
The Ironworks twins stared in surprise at the thing before them. It was a large diesel, with a large mechanical claw placed atop its roof on a flat car, as it had no power bogies to sit upon. He was pulled along by two diesel shunters.
Man, who knew the boss was so heavy?
Of course, after all, who's doing all his work?
Us? No, dummy, the man in the moon. Is there a man in the moon? I don't know, I never really looked.
Shut up, you two idiots! Arry and Bert, show these two to the back of the building. Finally got ourselves a new scrap processor. Good to see the Fat Controller himself.
The Ironworks twins looked at the strange train, not entirely sure what they were seeing was real. The big diesel glared an icy glare at them, making their grease run cold. Both wouldn't say, but they both wondered who could design such an engine. They'd heard of self-propelled crane engines, but given the massive claw atop its roof, they felt this thing was more than that. The big diesel uttered a low snarl. It sounded like an animal.
Right this way.
Right. Follow us.
The twins led the train to the back of the smelting shed. All the while, the other two diesels continued to chatter about anything and everything, while the big diesel said nothing. Upon arriving at the back, the twins saw something that made them gasp. A large concrete footer had been built near the smelting shed, the hole in the middle appearing to be big enough for an engine to fit into it. A crane was located nearby, ready and waiting.
We got this from here, bumblebees. Yeah, so go buzz off.
The twins did so, but returned later pushing a set of oil tankers for the generators, the tracks leading past where they'd left the visitors. The large diesel had been lifted off the tracks and placed in the concrete foundation. Workers were working around the diesel, attaching wires and fuel lines into the engine. Arry and Bert then knew what the foreman had meant. This diesel wasn't here for scrap, it was here to assist in scrapping. It spoke for the first time, talking to the other two shunters.
I can't believe I ever put my faith in you, Splodge! You two idiots were always cozy with the manager, doing exactly what he says.
Well, the manager's our boss. Yeah, unlike you. We don't know why we even called you boss.
Because you two are stupid without me! What would you even do without me watching out for you? Who's the one who gave you work to do? Gave you a purpose?
Oh, you mean doing your jobs? Spying for you? Finding steam engines ready to be scrapped? Luring them where you wanted them? Taking all the risks while you took none? Well, no more, Tin. We got better things to do than do your bidding.
The diesel, 10, growled at the two shunters, rage crossing his face.
You better take that back! You know who you're talking to, don't you? Diesel 10! Mr. 10 out of 10 for devious deeds and brutal strength! The scourge of steamers! The horror of the rails! The real beaching axe! You two better show me the respect I'm owed!
Arry and Bert gasped. They hadn't known that this was Diesel 10 himself. His name was legendary, whispered among scrap merchants in hushed tones out of fear he would come appear, of the diesel that took great joy in breaking engines apart whenever he could catch them. While the twins took great joy in their task of scrapping engines, they never went out of their way to hunt them down. If a steamer ended up at the smelters, they were there for one thing, to be melted down. It was their job, and they were trying to fix that with Stepney. He cheated the system, he'd broken the rules. That steamer was in the wrong, not them. But Diesel 10, he also broke the system. Hunting engines whose time was not up yet, hadn't been decided for them by people who made them, owned them. And there he was, in their yard, being made to work. Why?
Yeah, well, we don't really like you. Empathetically. Is that the correct word? I think so. Good word.
10 looked at the shunters, glaring coldly. The claw lay limply by his side, his engine grinding as the workers tried to get it to turn over.
You know something, Splodge?
10 asked at last, quietly.
Huh? What'd you say? Former boss? Yeah, why don't you speak up?
It's important. Come closer.
10 said, quieter still. The two diesels then edged forwards closer, telling their former boss to speak louder.
Come on, 10. Tell us, what is it? Yeah, what is it?
Are you sure you want to hear?
Duh. That's why we're asking.
Suddenly, there was a cough, a splutter, and a roar as 10's engine started. The claw on his roof snapped up, swinging wildly for a moment before sideswiping the two diesels and knocking them over onto their sides. 10's grin snapped into an animalistic snarl as he gritted his teeth before bellowing out loudly for the whole smelter's yard to hear.
I didn't like you two either!
It continued for what felt like forever. But really, only lasted a couple minutes. Before with a bang and a cough, Ten's engine died again. The claw on his roof similarly dropped down, coated in oil that dripped off the arm, with a buffer hung stuck in one of the claw's teeth. Then, Ten started to laugh. It was a crazed laugh, insane and triumphant. It lasted for what felt like forever before it stopped, and the diesel said with a sigh,
7 years of wanting to do that. That felt good.
Twins were horrified by what they'd seen, and began to reverse away when suddenly...
Hey, you two!
The Ironworks twins halted in their tracks and looked back towards where the voice had come from. From 10. The diesel's face was eerily relaxed. No trace of the monster had been moments before. Then the corners of his lips curled upwards into a smile.
Got some scrap for you. Take it away and bring me some more.
We will.
Just give us a minute. Oh, we just need some black glass and such. Yeah. Oh, we'll be back. We'll be back soon.
The two quickly reversed away again, and they would have kept going, never to set one wheel turn back into these sidings again, had Ten not said one last parting sentence.
I suggest you don't keep me waiting, huh? Or I will find a way back onto the rails and find you!
Arry and Bert silently agreed it was best to do as he asked. When they tried to mention what had happened to the foreman, all they got in response was,
Mr. Hat was right. The thing really is a monster.
Percy stared in shock at the story the Iron Twins told. That monster was here, on Sodor, and these two were guarding it.
So that's the deal. We make sure he stays where he is, give him the odd truck or two to crunch up, make sure he doesn't figure out a way to break free.
But why? You hate...
Of course we hate steam engines, but that's not changed.
But we can't let him get one of you. Fast told us if we ever let that happen, he'd see to it that we were fed to him to be torn to shreds. And you saw how he was. That monster wouldn't hesitate to rip us apart regardless if we were diesels like him.
Fat Hat says he'll pay our manager twice our value for brand new diesels. Easiest thing in the world. So if we want to stay on the rails, we'd better do our job and nothing else.
Of course, if one of your steamers breaks down and Fat decides you're too expensive to fix, they'll be into the smelting pot in the shed with you. So remember, we could make your ending far worse.
At the mercy of him.
Percy gulped, understanding. From behind the smelter shed, the animalistic howling subsided into silence. All that could be heard was the blowers feeding air to the furnaces. The two shunters quickly rumbled away, along the line headed to the back, and Percy backed away. His eyes stood focused towards the back of the large smelting shed. The memory of what was back there flashed in his mind on repeat. Percy soon turned around, and he left the smelters in a hurry. As he chuffed down the walled-off corridor, separating the railway from sight of the town, he could hear the clock tower in the centre of Killdane chime the hour. 10 o'clock.
10. He'll be scrapped one day. Yeah, he'll break down and there will be no more need for him.
Even as he said this, Percy felt very unsure. But there was one thing he did know. He was never going back to the smelters alone.